Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So glad you could join me. As you can see, I don't have my magazine because it didn't come. So, oh well, whatever. Anyway, thank you for coming to another of our Shabbat Torah sessions. You can also check your email, and there should be some a schedule that went out for the Torah Study groups that we're going to have in August that are going to be over Zoom, so we can actually study. I was about to say in person, but we can study like face to face. That's the word. So I'm gonna put on this black Jerusalem themed kippah for my Torah study. No particular reason, just spoke to me. There we go. All right, and we've got our Torah, Tanakh. And we're going to read in chapter 4. Ve'et Hanan is the name of the portion, and we're going to read. So Moses is at the Promised Land. Remember, Deuteronomy, which is the book we're reading, is basically just Moses telling the people stuff. There's not really any stories. They're just kind of reviewing things. And so now Moses is telling them that they're going to go into the land of Israel. They're going to take control of it. But then Moses says that in the future, their descendants are not going to follow the laws. They're not going to keep the mitzvot. And therefore, they're going to get kicked out of the land of Israel. But then Moses says that eventually God's going to, the people are going to turn back towards God and the mitzvot and the laws and all that stuff. And God's going to bring them back. So, with that as a preface, let's read. Exactly on the next page. There we go. When you have begotten children, and your children's children, and they are long established in the land, should you act wickedly, and make for yourselves a sculpted image in any likeness, causing the Lord of your God displeasure and vexation, I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you, that you shall soon perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You shall not long endure in it, and you shall be utterly wiped out. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and only a scant few of you will be left among the nations to which the Lord will drive you. There you will serve man-made gods of wood and stone that you cannot see or hear or smell. Oh, sorry, let me reread that. There you will serve man-made gods of wood and stone, who cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if you search there for the Lord your God, you will find God, if only you seek God with all your heart and soul, when you are in distress, because all these things have befallen you, and, in the end, return to the Lord your God and obey God. For the Lord your God is a compassionate God. God will not fail you, nor will God let you perish. God will not forget the covenant which God made on oath with your ancestors. So, pretty clear. The Jews at some point are going to be kicked out of the land of Israel, and they are going to be, what's the right word, taken in by other peoples, and they're going to be forced to worship their gods. Gods who Moses is specific to point out, they aren't real because they can't see, they can't hear, they can't smell, they can't touch, unlike Adonai, who does have all of these senses. Basically saying that the gods you're going to be worshiping with these other people are false. What I want to talk about is that in the Torah, in the text, in the main text of the Jews, it very specifically says, hey Jews, you're gonna mess up. And I think that's a really great thing to include in a holy text of saying that being holy and being religious can be difficult. And that sometimes you're going to make mistakes. Maybe you're even going to make such a big mistake that you end up worshiping false gods. In this case, they meant like what we would call pagan gods, like maybe Greek gods or Egyptian gods or Phoenician gods, stuff like that. But nowadays, we can more imagine someone worshiping fake things that aren't God, like maybe someone would worship money. Maybe they would worship like screens. Maybe they would worship Food. I don't know. But like stuff that doesn't hear, doesn't eat, doesn't smell, doesn't see. Things that don't give back to you. Things that are just are you don't really have a relationship with them in the same way that you would have a relationship with God or the Torah or with your Jewish community. But again, Moses says you're going to screw up, and eventually, if you decide to turn back to God, back to Judaism, back to the community, back to Torah, then you'll be welcome back. And I think that's a really great message that when we have goals, whether really broad goals like being Jewish or really narrow goals like keeping up our activity level, we're going to screw up pretty regularly. But that's okay. Screwing up doesn't mean that we failed. It doesn't mean that the game's over. It means that we just have to try again the next day or try again later that same day, whatever the case may be. And that failure is not failure, but that missing your target is expected, and you shouldn't be too hard on yourself. And that you should just, when it happens, take it in and then try to get over it and try to move on from there. So that's the lesson I want to leave with you today. Now we'll listen to some Misha Berach. Remember, this is a song of healing, usually done with the Torah out. So if you know someone who needs some healing, either from the pandemic, or maybe they're just kind of suffering because they've been inside for so long and it's really difficult, or maybe they're sick with something else, or maybe they're suffering in like not health ways, but they're suffering in other fashions. I don't know, maybe you have a friend who's really sad, or maybe you know someone who's going through a breakup, or kind of just anything that causes people trouble, and they would need some kind of healing. So take the time to think about that person, maybe think about times that you have missed your mark and that you want to get back on track, and please join me in just kind of some reflection. Speaking of learning as doing and making some mistakes, I find it amusing that it's taken me, 3 months into this? 4 months? Yeah, about 4 months into doing these online ones, that if we play the music, that it's easier for me just to kind of sit and close my eyes rather than kind of stare at the camera quietly for 2 minutes. I've always felt a little bit weird about that. I don't know if you have, but I think it's funny that it took me so long to finally figure out, here's a way I can do it that feels right. So again, if you backslide, you just got to kind of keep focused and you'll figure it out. Or, like when I was reading earlier, and I read that very important sentence wrong about gods who don't eat or smell or taste or see. And I had to go back and reread it again. That's okay. I don't think anyone thinks any less of me for it. Oh, also, I guess we'll go on a little longer than usual. So this past week was Tisha B'Av, which is a very important Jewish holiday commemorating, not celebrating, but commemorating the destruction of the temple. And that, of course, is sort of the cataclysmic version of what Moses is talking about the people being kicked out of the land of Israel, where they're kicked out of the land of Israel, and the temple where God supposedly resides in the land is destroyed. But now we have the modern state of Israel. And so even though things, didn't really work out back then, hopefully things will work out better now. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in Israel that some of it it's always difficult to talk about Israel because there's a lot going on there. But there's a lot of stuff that people can take pride in, and there's a lot of stuff that people can criticize. And it's one of the things that the rabbis actually said caused the destruction and the exile that Tisha B'Av commemorates, is that the people of Israel weren't taking care of each other. And yeah, taking care of each other sort of means supporting each other, but taking care of someone can also mean rebuking them and saying, you're doing something wrong and you really need to stop that. It's possible to be loving and caring towards someone even in a time when they need criticism and they need to be corrected. Yeah, cool. All right. So, thank you for joining me so much. Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Remember to check your emails for the August schedule because most of our programs are changing time than they were in July. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. And at the very least, I will post these videos again next week. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.